What would you do if you witnessed injustice unfolding right before your eyes? This is the story of Marcus Thompson, a war veteran who lost his sight serving his country, and how two corrupt police officers tried to take away the one thing that gave him independence: his service dog, Apollo. But what these officers didn't expect was that a retired Navy SEAL, Jake Mitchell, and his loyal K-9 companion would be there at that very moment. What happened in that parking lot in San Diego changed everyone's lives involved and exposed a web of corruption nobody imagined existed. This story will make you question who we can really trust. Marcus Thompson never imagined his life would turn out this way. At 52 years old, he had already lived through more than most people could handle in a lifetime. The scorching heat of Afghanistan, the sound of gunfire that never quite leave your ears, and that one mission in 2011 that changed everything forever. He still remembers the explosion, the blinding flash, the deafening roar, and then darkness. Permanent darkness. An improvised explosive device had detonated just meters away from his unit. While his brothers in arms survived with various injuries, Marcus lost something he never thought he could live without: his sight. The transition back to civilian life was brutal. San Diego, California, with its perfect 70-degree weather and endless sunshine, felt like a cruel joke to someone who could no longer see the ocean waves or the palm trees swaying in the Pacific breeze. His modest one-bedroom apartment on University Avenue became both his sanctuary and his prison. The sounds of traffic, the smell of Mexican food from the taqueria downstairs, the feeling of warm California sun on his face, these became his new reality. Depression hit hard. For 2 years, Marcus barely left his apartment. His disability checks covered the basics. But what good was money when you felt like half a person? His ex-wife had left him shortly after the injury, unable to handle the weight of his condition and the emotional trauma that came with it. His teenage daughter lived 3 states away, their relationship strained by distance and circumstances beyond their control. Everything changed when he met Apollo. The Veteran Affairs Office connected Marcus with Guide Dog of America, an organization that trains service dogs for visually impaired veterans. The application process took months. Background checks, home visits, interviews, medical evaluations. Marcus almost gave up several times. But something inside him, maybe that same stubbornness that got him through boot camp, kept him going. Apollo was a 3-year-old golden Labrador retriever with a coat the color of honey and eyes that seemed to understand human pain. The moment Marcus first touched Apollo's head during their introduction meeting, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The training period was intense. 4 weeks at the facility in Silmar, California, where Marcus learned to trust Apollo completely. They practiced navigating busy streets, crossing intersections, avoiding obstacles, and even using public transportation. Apollo learned to recognize over 40 different commands and could sense when Marcus was having an anxiety attack before Marcus himself realized it. When they finally returned to San Diego together, Marcus was a different man. Apollo gave him back his independence. They developed a routine that brought structure and meaning back to Marcus's life. Every morning at 7, they would walk to the nearby coffee shop on El Cajon Boulevard. Apollo knew the route by heart: 16 blocks, 3 traffic lights, 2 crosswalks, 1 pedestrian bridge over the highway. The baristas at the coffee shop knew them both by name. "The usual, Marcus?" they'd ask, already preparing his large black coffee with 2 sugars. Apollo would wait patiently, his tail occasionally thumping against the floor, never breaking his focus unless Marcus released him with command, "Free time." After coffee, they walked to Balboa Park, where Marcus would sit on his favorite bench near the fountain. He couldn't see the Spanish colonial revival architecture of the Museum of Man or the blooming jacaranda trees that turned the pathways purple in spring, but he could hear the children playing, smell the flowers, and feel Apollo's steady breathing beside him. These were his new treasures. Apollo was more than a service dog. He was Marcus's eyes, his companion, his reason to get up in the morning. When nightmares about Afghanistan jolted Marcus awake at 3 a.m, Apollo was there, pressing his warm body against Marcus's side, grounding him back to reality. When Marcus struggled with the simple act of crossing a street, Apollo was there, stopping at every curb, waiting for the right moment, ensuring his human safety. The bond between them was unbreakable, or so Marcus thought. He never imagined that on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in June, two men with badges would try to tear that bond apart. Marcus had developed a system for grocery shopping at the Vaughn's supermarket on University Avenue. He'd memorized the layout. Produce section immediately to the right, dairy in the back left corner, bread and cereals in aisle 3. He'd use a shopping list app on his phone that would read items aloud through his earpiece. Apollo would guide him through the aisles, stopping when Marcus needed to reach for something, patient as always. That particular Tuesday was unremarkable. The temperature hovered around 78 degrees, typical for a San Diego June. Marcus bought his usual items: milk, bread, coffee, some frozen dinners, fresh fruit that the produce manager helped him select. At the checkout, the cashier, a young woman named Rosa who always greeted Apollo with affection, made small talk about the weather and the upcoming 4th of July. "You take care, Mr. Thompson," she said as she handed him his receipt. "You too, Apollo." Marcus and Apollo walked out of the automatic doors into the parking lot. The afternoon sun felt warm on Marcus's face. He could hear seagulls in the distance, always present in coastal San Diego, scavenging for food. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with the ocean breeze. Apollo guided him toward the pedestrian area, where they usually waited for the bus. That's when Marcus heard the footsteps approaching. Heavy footsteps. More than one person. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was male, authoritative, with an edge that immediately put Marcus on alert. "We need to talk to you about your dog." Marcus stopped, confused. "Is there a problem, officer?" He heard the jingle of equipment on a police belt. 2 sets of footsteps, he realized. 2 officers. "We received complaints about this animal," another voice said, slightly younger than the first. "Multiple reports of aggressive behavior. We're going to need you to hand over the dog." Marcus's heart began to race. "I don't understand. Apollo is a certified service dog. He's never been aggressive. There must be some mistake." "No mistake," the first voice said, closer now. Marcus could smell coffee and cologne. "We have documentation of incidents. The dog is a public safety hazard." "That's impossible," Marcus said, his voice rising despite his attempt to stay calm. "Apollo is trained by Guide Dogs of America. He's registered with the county. I have all his papers at home. This has to be a misunderstanding." "Sir, we're not going to argue with you," the second officer said. "You can either hand over the dog voluntarily, or we'll be forced to take more serious action." Marcus felt Apollo press closer against his leg, sensing his human's distress. This couldn't be happening. Apollo was his lifeline. Without him, Marcus couldn't navigate the city, couldn't maintain his independence, couldn't function in daily life. "Please," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "You can't take him. I'm blind. I need him. He's a service dog. This is protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act." "We're aware of the law," the first officer said, and Marcus could hear the sneer in his voice. "But public safety supersedes your personal needs. Now hand over the leash, or we'll charge you with obstruction." Marcus felt a hand grab Apollo's leash, trying to yank it from his grip. Apollo, trained never to leave Marcus's side, held firm but didn't growl or show any aggression. Marcus's hands tightened on the leash instinctively. "Please don't do this," Marcus pleaded, his voice desperate now. "I'm a veteran. I serve my country. Apollo is all I have." "We don't care if you're a veteran or the president," the second officer said. "Let go of the leash now." The situation was escalating fast. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest, the same panic he felt during his worst anxiety attacks. His mind raced. What were his rights? Could they really just take Apollo? Why were they doing this? None of it made sense. Apollo remained calm, his training overriding any instinct to react to the tension. But Marcus could feel the slight tremor in the dog's body as strange hands pulled at his collar. This was turning into a nightmare. And Marcus, unable to see what was happening around him, felt more helpless than he had since losing his sight. What Marcus couldn't know was that someone was watching. Someone with the training to recognize injustice, the courage to intervene, and the presence of mind to document everything. "So what do you think about what you've seen so far? Does this situation seem right to you?" Let us know in the comments what you're feeling about Marcus's predicament. Jake Mitchell had learned to trust his instincts long before he became a Navy SEAL. Growing up in rural Montana, his father, a Vietnam veteran, taught him to read situations, to sense when something was off. That training intensified during his 12 years in Naval Special Warfare Command, where a split-second decision could mean the difference between life and death. Now, at 45, retired from active duty, but never quite able to leave the warrior mindset behind, Jake was trying to build something resembling a normal life in San Diego. The warm weather helped with the chronic pain from old injuries. The proximity to the ocean gave him peace. But the post-traumatic stress disorder was a constant companion, an unwelcome shadow that colored every interaction, every loud noise, every crowded space. Rex was his lifeline, a 4-year-old German shepherd who had served alongside Jake during his last deployment. Rex was technically a retired military working dog. When Jake left the service, he'd gone through every channel possible to adopt Rex. The paperwork alone took 8 months, but Jake was determined. Rex had saved his life twice in combat. Jake wasn't going to abandon him. They lived together in a small house in North Park, just a few miles from downtown San Diego. The neighborhood was gentrifying. Craft breweries replacing dive bars, artisan coffee shops popping up next to old liquor stores. Jake didn't care much for the changes. He kept to himself, took odd jobs in private security, and spent most of his time with Rex. That Tuesday afternoon, Jake was doing something mundane, grocery shopping. He'd learned to handle everyday tasks in stages, never staying in crowded places too long. The Vons on University Avenue was usually quiet in the afternoon, which is why he chose that time. Rex walked beside him without a leash. As a certified service dog for PTSD, Rex was trained to detect Jake's anxiety levels and provide grounding pressure when needed. The dog was calm, professional, his dark eyes constantly scanning the environment, a habit from his military days that he'd never quite lost. Jake had just loaded his groceries into his truck, a weathered Ford F-150 that had seen better days, when he noticed commotion near the store entrance. Years of tactical training made him automatically assess the situation. 2 men in police uniforms, 1 civilian, clearly distressed, a dog, a service dog. Jake recognized immediately from the vest and harness. Something was wrong. The body language was all off. The officers were too aggressive, too close to the civilian. The civilian, Jake could see now he was holding a white cane. He was blind, was trying to back away while keeping hold of his dog's leash. Jake's first instinct was to walk away. He'd learned the hard way that getting involved in police business, even when something seemed wrong, usually ended badly for everyone. He'd seen enough injustice in the world. He couldn't fix everything. But then he saw when the officers grabbed the dog's collar and yanked hard. The blind man stumbled, crying out, "Please, don't take him." And Jake's body moved before his mind could talk him out of it. Rex sensed a change immediately, staying close to Jake's side as they approached. "Everything okay here, officers?" Jake's voice was calm, measured, but carried the weight of someone accustomed to command. The 2 officers turned. The older one, maybe late 30s with a thick neck and a face that suggested too many hours in the sun, scowled at the interruption. His nameplate read Reeves. "Move along, sir. Police business." "I can see that," Jake said evenly. "Just wonder what the issue is with the service dog." The younger officer, hardly according to his badge, stepped forward. He was in his late 20s, with the kind of swagger that came from someone who hadn't been humbled by life yet. "This is none of your concern. Keep walking unless you want to be charged with interfering with police work." Jake noticed details the way he'd been trained to notice details. Reeves's hand kept drifting toward his service weapon, not quite touching it, but a clear intimidation tactic. Hartley was positioned to block Jake's view of what Reeves was doing with the blind man. Their body cameras were conspicuously turned off. Jake could see the lack of the small red recording light. Red flags everywhere. "I'm just a concerned citizen," Jake said, keeping his tone neutral. "It's my right to observe police activity in a public space." "Listen, buddy," Reeves growled, taking a step toward Jake. "I don't know if you're trying to be a hero or what, but you need to walk away. Now." The blind man's voice cut through the tension. Please help me. They're trying to take Apollo. I haven't done anything wrong. Jake pulled out his smartphone. In one smooth motion, he opened the camera app and began recording. Officers, can you explain what law this gentleman and his service dog have violated? Reeves's face flushed red. Put that phone away. I have a First Amendment right to record police activity in public, Jake said calmly. Years of briefings and debriefings had taught him to keep his voice level even when adrenaline was pumping. I'm not interfering. I'm standing at a reasonable distance. I'm simply documenting what I'm observing. You're making a big mistake, Hartley said, his hand moving to his own weapon. That's when Rex let out a low, rumbling growl. Not an aggressive sound, but a warning. Jake felt the familiar pressure of Rex's body against his leg. The dog's way of saying, threat detected, ready to respond. Easy, Rex, Jake murmured. Then, louder, to the officers, Gentlemen, I'm a retired Navy SEAL. My dog is a trained military working dog. We're not looking for a confrontation. I'm simply exercising my legal right to record this interaction. Now, can you please explain the legal basis for confiscating a certified service dog from a blind veteran? The mention of Navy SEAL made both officers pause. Jake saw the calculation in their eyes. Reeves's hand moved away from his weapon. We received complaints, Reeves said, his tone slightly less aggressive but still hostile. The dog has been reported as aggressive. We have authority to remove potentially dangerous animals. What complaints? Jake asked, still recording. From whom? When? And what's the official report number? Reeves and Hartley exchanged glances. Jake recognized that look. He'd seen it on the faces of local contractors in Afghanistan who'd been caught lying about supplies. Panic barely concealed beneath bravado. That's police information, Hartley said. We don't have to share that with you. Actually, under California law, this gentleman has a right to know the specific complaints against his service dog, Jake said. He didn't know if that was exactly true, but his tone was confident enough that it didn't matter, and he has the right to contest those complaints. You can't just confiscate a registered service animal without due process. The blind man, Marcus, Jake would later learn his name, spoke up, his voice stronger now that he knew someone was on his side. I've had Apollo for 3 years. He's never shown aggression to anyone. He's trained by Guide Dogs of America. Everything is registered with the county. I have papers. Papers can be faked, Reeves said, but his voice lacked conviction now. Jake kept recording, making sure to capture the officers' faces, their badge numbers, and the service dog vest clearly displaying Apollo certification. Officers, I'm going to ask one more time, what specific law is being violated here? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like harassment of a disabled veteran and his service animal. A small crowd had begun to gather. Other shoppers, drawn by the commotion, had their phones out. More cameras, more witnesses. The balance of power was shifting. Reeves's jaw clenched. He stared at Jake with undisguised hatred. This isn't over, he said. Then to Marcus, you're lucky today, but we'll be watching you and that dog. With that, both officers turned and walked toward their patrol car. Jake kept recording until they drove away. Only then did he lower his phone. Marcus was trembling, still holding tight to Apollo's leash. The dog pressed against his leg, offering comfort. Are you okay? Jake asked gently. Marcus's voice shook when he answered. I don't know what just happened. Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here. What's your name, sir? Marcus. Marcus Thompson. Jake Mitchell. He paused. You said you're a veteran? Army. Lost my sight in Afghanistan, 2011. Jake felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Brother in arms. Marine Corps, then Navy Special Warfare. Multiple deployments. They stood there for a moment. 2 combat veterans in a supermarket parking lot in San Diego, connected by shared experience and the bond of having seen the worst of what humans could do to each other. Listen, Marcus, Jake said. Something wasn't right about that interaction. Those officers were lying. I could tell. Do you have any idea why they would target you? Marcus shook his head. None. I've never had any trouble. Apollo is the best-behaved dog I've ever known. This came out of nowhere. Jake's investigative instincts, honed through years of intelligence gathering in hostile territories, were firing on all cylinders. This wasn't random. Police didn't just show up and try to confiscate service dogs without reason. There was something else going on here. I recorded the whole thing. Jake said, I'm going to send this video to some people I know. Former JAG officers, civil rights attorneys. If those cops were trying to pull something illegal, we need to document it. I can't afford lawyers, Marcus said quietly. You might not need to. Let me make some calls first. Jake gave Marcus's phone number and took Marcus's information. In the meantime, be careful. If those officers approach you again, don't engage. Call me immediately. As Jake drove home that afternoon, Rex beside him in the passenger seat, his mind was racing. He'd seen corruption before in war zones, in foreign governments, in contractors trying to skim money from military budgets. But seeing it here, in his own city, targeting a disabled veteran, that was something different. That was personal. He didn't know it yet, but that cell phone video was about to change everything. Thank you so much for staying with us this far. We're incredibly grateful that you're here, invested in Marcus and Jake's story. And trust us, the best is still to come. What we're about to reveal will shock you. Jake Mitchell wasn't the type to let things go. That night, he sat at a small kitchen table, laptop open, Rex sleeping at his feet, and began digging into Officers Reeves and Hartley. What he found made his blood boil. He started by uploading the video to a private server, making multiple backups. Then he reached out to old contacts, former military attorneys, a buddy who worked in the FBI's San Diego field office, a journalist friend who specialized in police misconduct stories. He sent the video to all of them with a simple message: something's wrong here. Need eyes on this. The responses came quickly. His JAG attorney friend, Commander Patricia Hayes, retired but still connected to the legal community, called within an hour. Jake, this is bad, she said without preamble. Really bad. I'm watching this video, and I'm seeing at least 4 violations of constitutional rights, not to mention California state law regarding service animals. These officers were trying to steal that man's dog. Steal. Jake said, why would cops steal a service dog? That's what we need to find out. But I'm going to make some calls. This veteran, Marcus Thompson, he needs legal representation immediately. He can't afford it. He won't have to. I know at least 3 firms that would take this pro bono just for the publicity. Let me handle that side. You keep digging. Jake did exactly that. He started with public records. David Reeves, 38 years old, 12 years with the San Diego Police Department. 3 complaints for excessive force, all dismissed or settled quietly. Tom Hartley, 27, 5 years on the force, partnered with Reeves for the past 18 months. No official complaints, but reading between the lines of his performance reviews, Jake could see he was Reeves's protege. But it was when Jake started looking into their financial records, thanks to a friend who knew how to navigate public databases and maybe bend a few privacy rules, that things got interesting. Both officers had recently made large cash deposits. Multiple deposits, actually, spread over the past 6 months. $5,000 here, $3,000 there, always just under the $10,000 threshold that would trigger federal reporting requirements. Jake knew that pattern. He'd seen it in money laundering investigations overseas. These guys were getting paid for something, and they were trying to hide it. But paid for what? The answer came from an unexpected source. Jake had posted about the incident in a few veteran support groups on social media, asking if anyone had experienced similar harassment. Within 24 hours, he had 8 responses. A 72-year-old veteran in North Park. His 20-year-old dog had been taken by police, claiming the animal was unlicensed. He paid $2,000 to get it back. A disabled woman in City Heights. Her emotional support animal, a small terrier, was confiscated during a traffic stop. Officers claimed the dog was aggressive. She paid $1,500 to get it back. An immigrant family in Linda Vista. Their family pet was taken from their front yard. Officers claiming they received complaints about barking. They paid $3,000 for its return. The pattern was clear and sickening. Reeves and Hartley, possibly with others, were running an extortion racket. They targeted vulnerable people, elderly, disabled, immigrants, anyone unlikely to fight back or understand the legal system. They confiscate pets under false pretenses, hold them for a few days, then offer to settle the situation if the owners paid a fine. These fines weren't official, weren't documented, went straight into the officers' pockets. Marcus had been their latest target. A blind veteran living alone on disability checks. Perfect victim. Except they hadn't counted on Jake Mitchell being in that parking lot with a camera phone. Jake compiled everything into a comprehensive report. The video, the pattern of victims, the financial irregularities, everything. He sent it to Patricia Hayes, to his FBI contact, and to his journalist friend Rebecca Chun, who worked for the San Diego Union-Tribune. Rebecca called him at 11 that night. "Jake, this is Pulitzer material. Are you sure about your sources?" "Every single one. I have names, dates, amounts paid. These aren't just allegations. These are documented victims willing to go on record. I need to verify everything independently, but if this holds up..." She paused. "These cops are going to prison, and the department is going to have a major scandal on its hands." "Good," Jake said. "They should." The next morning, Patricia Hayes arrived at Marcus's apartment with two other attorneys from a prestigious firm downtown. Jake came too, along with Rex. When Marcus opened the door, Apollo immediately greeted Rex with a reserved but friendly demeanor of one working dog meeting another. Marcus made coffee. Jake noticed how confidently he moved through his kitchen, Apollo always nearby but not underfoot, and they sat down to talk. "Marcus," Patricia began gently, "what happened to you in that parking lot was a crime. Officers Reeves and Hartley were attempting to extort you. We believe they've done this to many others." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Why me?" "Because you're vulnerable," Patricia said bluntly. "You're blind. You're living on a fixed income. You're isolated. They thought you'd be easy to intimidate. They thought you'd pay whatever they demanded to get Apollo back." "I would have," Marcus admitted quietly. "I would have given them everything I had. He's everything to me." "That's what they were counting on," Jake said. "But here's the thing, Marcus. You don't have to be scared anymore. We have evidence. We have other victims. We have them on camera, violating your rights. And we're going to make sure they pay for what they've done." Over the next week, things moved fast. Rebecca Chen's article hit the front page of the Union-Tribune as DPD officers accused of pet extortion scheme. The video went viral on social media, racking up millions of views. Local news stations picked up the story. Suddenly, everyone in San Diego knew about Marcus Thompson and his service dog Apollo. The police department initially tried to control the narrative. The chief held a press conference, calling the allegation concerning and promising a full internal investigation. But as more victims came forward, Jake's report had identified 8, but now there were 15, then 23, then over 30. The department was forced to act. Reeves and Hartley were placed on administrative leave. Internal Affairs launched an investigation. But it was the FBI's involvement that really changed everything. Jake's contact, Special Agent Maria Rodriguez, brought in a full team. This wasn't just about 2 corrupt cops anymore. This was about organized crime within a law enforcement agency. The investigation revealed that Reeves and Hartley weren't working alone. 2 other officers were involved, along with a civilian who worked at the county animal shelter, someone who would hold the confiscated pets, keep them off the official records, and release them when the fines were paid. The money was being split 4 ways, sometimes 5 if they needed someone else's help. Over 18 months, they'd extorted more than $200,000 from vulnerable San Diego residents. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, victim testimonies, surveillance footage from various incidents, and, most damning of all, text messages between conspirators discussing their scores and dividing up payments. In late August, federal indictments came down. Reeves, Hartley, and their 2 accomplices were charged with extortion, fraud, conspiracy, theft, civil rights violations, and a dozen other counts. The civilian at the animal shelter took a plea deal and agreed to testify against the others. Marcus watched it all unfold from his apartment, listening to news reports, taking calls from reporters wanting his story, trying to process the fact that his life had become the center of a major criminal case. Jake came by often during those weeks. They'd sit on Marcus's small balcony, Apollo and Rex lying peacefully together, and talk. Not always about the case. Sometimes they'd talk about their service, about the missions that still haunted their dreams, about trying to build meaningful lives after combat. "I spent 12 years in some of the most dangerous places on Earth," Jake said one evening. "Fought terrorists, hunted war criminals, operated in countries where lawlessness was the norm. And I come home to find corruption right here, in my own city, targeting people who served just like we did. It doesn't make sense." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Maybe it does, in a way. War changes you. It shows you that evil isn't always obvious. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it has a badge. That's what scares me," Jake admitted. "If we can't trust the people who are supposed to protect us, who can we trust?" "Each other," Marcus said simply. "You trusted your instinct that day in the parking lot. You could have walked away. Most people would have. But you didn't. You stood up. That matters." The trial was set for November. In the meantime, the police department was reeling. The chief resigned under pressure. The mayor called for reforms. Community groups demanded better oversight and accountability. Marcus and Jake's story had sparked something larger, a citywide conversation about police conduct, corruption, and the treatment of vulnerable populations. But for Marcus, the most important thing was simpler. He still had Apollo. Every morning, they still walked to the coffee shop. They still went to Balboa Park. Life continued, not quite the same as before, but continuing nonetheless. And now he had a friend, someone who understood what it meant to serve, to sacrifice, to struggle with the aftermath of war. Someone who'd stood up when it mattered most. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage have the biggest consequences. Jake Mitchell stopping in a parking lot to film two corrupt cops didn't just save Marcus's service dog. It exposed a criminal enterprise, brought justice to dozens of victims, and proved that even in a system that sometimes protects its own at all costs, truth can still prevail. But the story wasn't over yet. The trial would bring even more revelations, and the path to justice was just beginning. The San Diego County Courthouse, an imposing structure of concrete and glass on Union Street, had seen its share of high-profile cases over the years, but few had captured public attention quite like the people of California v. David Reeves et al. By the time the trial began in mid-November, the case had evolved into something far bigger than two corrupt cops shaking down pet owners. Federal prosecutors had taken over, and what had started as a state investigation was now a RICO case, Racket Influence in Corrupt Organizations Act, typically reserved for organized crime syndicates and mob bosses. Marcus Thompson arrived at the courthouse on the first day of trial flanked by his legal team and Jake Mitchell. Apollo, wearing his service vest, walked calmly beside Marcus through a gauntlet of news cameras and reporters shouting questions. Rex walked beside Jake, equally composed despite the chaos. "Mr. Thompson, how do you feel about facing the officers who tried to take Apollo?" "Jake, is it true you received death threats from police supporters? Do you think this case will change how police treat disabled veterans?" Patricia Hayes, lead attorney for Marcus, held up a hand. "Mr. Thompson will make a statement after the trial. For now, we're focused on getting justice." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The prosecution table was crowded with assistant U.S. attorneys, FBI agents, and mountains of documented evidence. The defense had hired expensive lawyers. Jake wondered darkly where corrupt cops making $60,000 a year got the money for counsel that cost $500 an hour. Judge Elizabeth Chun, a no-nonsense jurist with 30 years on the bench, called the court to order. "Let's be clear from the start," she said. "This trial will be conducted with dignity and respect. I will not tolerate grandstanding from either side. The facts will speak for themselves." The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. Assistant U.S. Attorney James Walsh laid out the case methodically. 18 months of systematic extortion, 37 documented victims, over $200,000 stolen from some of San Diego's most vulnerable residents. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Walsh said, his voice carrying the weight of righteous anger, The defendants didn't just break the law. They betrayed the public trust in the most cynical way imaginable. They wore badges that said protect and serve, but they used those badges to prey on people who couldn't fight back. Elderly veterans, disabled citizens, immigrant families afraid of deportation, people who loved their pets and would pay anything to get them back. He clicked a remote, and the courtroom screen lit up with Jake's video from the parking lot. You're going to see this footage. You're going to hear Marcus Thompson, a man who lost his sight, serving this country in Afghanistan, begging these officers not to take his service dog. You're going to hear the fear in his voice. You're going to see two police officers attempting to commit a crime in broad daylight. And you're going to hear the only reason this crime didn't succeed. Because a brave citizen, Jake Mitchell, had the courage to intervene and document what was happening. The defense's opening was predictably focused on procedure and reasonable doubt. David Reeves' attorney, a silver-haired man named Robert Thornton, argued that his client was simply doing his job. Officer Reeves is a decorated police officer with 12 years of exemplary service. He responded to what he believed were legitimate complaints about an aggressive animal. Was his judgment wrong? Perhaps. Was he acting with criminal intent? Absolutely not. The prosecution would have you believe that every difficult interaction between police and citizens is a crime. That's not justice. That's persecution of men who put their lives on the line every day. Jake, sitting in the gallery, felt his jaw clench. Rex, sensing his tension, pressed closer against his leg. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution paraded witness after witness, each telling their story of loss, intimidation, and extortion. There was Mrs. Chun, a 78-year-old Chinese immigrant whose family dog had been her only companion after her husband died. She testified through an interpreter, tears streaming down her face as she described paying officers $2,000 she couldn't afford to get her pet back. There was Daniel Rodriguez, a Marine Corps veteran with severe PTSD, who relied on his emotional support dog to manage his symptoms. Reeves and Hartley had taken the dog during a wellness check, claiming it was aggressive. Daniel paid $3,500 for its return and subsequently attempted suicide. He showed his scars to the jury. There was the Nguyen family, Vietnamese refugees who'd already lost everything once in their lives and were terrified of losing their children's pet. They paid $4,000 they'd saved for their daughter's college fund. Each testimony was more heartbreaking than the last. The jury, carefully selected to represent a cross-section of San Diego County, listened with increasingly grim expressions. Marcus took the stand on day 8. Patricia Hayes guided him through his testimony with practiced gentleness. Mr. Thompson, can you tell the jury about your service to this country? Marcus, his hands folded in his lap, Apollo lying quietly at his feet, spoke clearly. I enlisted in the Army in 2003, right after high school. I believed in serving something bigger than myself. I did 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. On my 3rd Afghanistan deployment, in 2011, my convoy was hit by an IED. I was the only survivor, but I lost my sight. What has life been like since then? Difficult. Marcus's voice was steady but emotional. I lost my marriage. My relationship with my daughter became strained. I battled depression for years. I felt like half a person. Then I got Apollo and everything changed. He gave me back my independence, my dignity, my reason to keep going. Can you describe what happened on June 15th of this year? Marcus recounted the parking lot incident in detail. His voice shook when he described the officers trying to take Apollo. The fear he felt, the desperation. I would have given them everything I had, he said. Every dollar in my bank account. I would have gone into debt. I would have done anything to keep Apollo. He's not just a dog to me. He's my eyes. He's my freedom. Without him, I'm trapped. Robert Thornton, Reeves' defense attorney, was aggressive during cross-examination. Mr. Thompson, isn't it true that you had an outstanding parking ticket at the time of this incident? Patricia Hayes objected immediately. Relevance, Your Honor? Sustained. Mr. Thornton, stay focused on the charges at hand. Mr. Thompson, you received quite a bit of media attention from this case, haven't you? You're something of a celebrity now. I never wanted attention, Marcus said quietly. I just wanted to keep my dog. But you didn't have to go to the media, did you? You could have filed a quiet complaint. Instead, you let your friend Mr. Mitchell turn this into a circus. Objection! Patricia was on her feet. Counsel is testifying, not questioning. Sustained. Mr. Thornton, last warning. The cross-examination went nowhere. Marcus was too sympathetic a witness, his story too compelling, his pain too genuine. Jake testified on day 10. His military background and decorated service made him a powerful witness. Commander Mitchell, Walsh said, using Jake's former rank, "What was your impression when you first saw Officers Reeves and Hartley interacting with Mr. Thompson?" "That something was very wrong. I've been trained to assess situations quickly. The officers' body language, their tone, the way they were positioning themselves around a blind civilian. It all indicated aggression and intimidation. This wasn't a lawful police action. This was two men attempting to commit a crime." "Why did you decide to intervene?" Jake looked directly at the jury. "Because I took an oath when I joined the military. I swore to protect and defend. That oath didn't end when I retired. When I see injustice, when I see someone being victimized, especially a fellow veteran, I can't just walk away. My conscience won't allow it." The defense tried to paint Jake as an anti-police vigilante, but it didn't work. His calm demeanor, his clear recitation of facts, and the unassailable video evidence made him bulletproof as a witness. The video itself was played multiple times throughout the trial. Each time, the impact on the jury was visible. You could see the discomfort on their faces as they watched Reeves and Hartley manhandle a blind man and his service dog. The prosecution's star witness, however, was someone unexpected. Thomas Brennan, the civilian who'd worked at the county animal shelter. Brennan had taken a plea deal, and his testimony exposed the full scope of the operation. "Reeves approached me about 6 months before I started helping them," Brennan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He knew I worked at the shelter. He asked if I could hold animals off the books, keep them out of the system. At first, I said no, but he offered me money, $500 per animal. I have gambling debts. I needed the money. How did the scheme work?" Walsh asked. "Reeves or Hartley would bring in an animal they confiscated. I'd keep it in a separate area, not log into our computer system. They'd wait a few days, then contact the owner and say they could settle the situation if they paid a fine. Once the payment was made, always cash, I'd release the animal. Reeves, Hartley, and the 2 other officers would split the money 4 ways. I got paid separately." "Did you ever question whether this was legal?" Brennan looked down. "I knew it wasn't. I didn't think we'd get caught. And I needed the money. How many animals did you help them hold illegally?" 43 that I remember clearly. Maybe a few more." The defense tried to discredit Brennan, painting him as a liar trying to save himself. But his testimony aligned too perfectly with bank records, victim statements, and other evidence. The most dramatic moment came when Rebecca Chun, the journalist who'd broken the story, testified about her investigation. She'd traced a money trail, interviewed dozens of victims, and uncovered connections to other potential crimes. "I discovered that at least 3 of the animals that were confiscated and never returned actually died in custody," she testified. "The families were still being extorted for payment, even though their pets were dead. When the families couldn't pay, the officers would claim the animals were adopted out. But there was no record of any adoptions because these animals were never in the system." The revelation caused an audible gasp in the courtroom. Judge Chin had called for order. As the trial progressed, the evidence became overwhelming. Bank records showing suspicious cash deposits, text messages discussing scores and complaining about cheap targets who couldn't pay enough, surveillance footage from other incidents, testimony from more than 20 victims. The defense's strategy fell apart. They couldn't explain away the mountain of evidence. They couldn't make Reeves and Hartley look like anything other than what they were, criminals who betrayed their badges. In his closing argument, James Walsh was fierce. "The defense wants you to believe this was all a misunderstanding, a series of unfortunate mistakes by officers trying to do their jobs. But misunderstandings don't leave a paper trail of cash deposits. Mistakes don't involve 43 illegally held animals. This wasn't confusion. This was calculated, systematic, criminal enterprise. He pointed at Reeves and Hartley. These men saw vulnerable people as opportunities. They saw pets as leverage. They saw their badges as licenses to steal. They're not officers of the law. They're predators who use the color of law to prey on the weak. The defense's closing was weak by comparison. Robert Thornton argued about reasonable doubt, about the presumption of innocence, about the difficulty of police work. But his heart didn't seem to be in it. Even he knew the case was lost. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, Marcus was in the courtroom, Apollo by his side. Jake sat directly behind him, Rex alert and watchful. The gallery was packed with victims, supporters, and media. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of racketeering, how do you find the defendant David Reeves? Guilty. On the charge of extortion. Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy. Guilty. 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 37 counts in total. The same for Hartley and the 2 other officers. Marcus sat perfectly still as the verdicts were read, his hand resting on Apollo's head. Jake saw a single tear roll down Marcus's cheek. When court was adjourned, Patricia Hayes turned to Marcus and squeezed his hand. You did it. You got justice. We did it, Marcus corrected quietly. All of us. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. When Marcus and Jake emerged, there was spontaneous applause. News cameras captured the moment. A blind veteran and a retired Navy SEAL. Standing together, their service dogs by their sides, victorious. Rebecca Chun pushed through the crowd with her microphone. Marcus, Jake, how do you feel about the verdict? Jake let Marcus answer first. I feel like maybe the system works after all, Marcus said. When enough good people stand up. When enough people refuse to look away. Justice is possible. Jake added, this is bigger than 2 corrupt cops. This is about accountability. This is about making sure that the badge means something again. That it represents protection, not predation. The sentencing came 6 weeks later. Reeves got 12 years in federal prison. Hartley got 10. The other 2 officers received 8 years each. Thomas Brennan, because of his cooperation, received 3 years and was banned from ever working with animals again. But perhaps the most important outcome came from the civil lawsuits that followed. The victims, represented by Patricia Hayes and her firm, sued the San Diego Police Department for negligence and inadequate oversight. The settlement was substantial. Over $2 million distributed among the 37 documented victims, with Marcus receiving one of the larger portions. More importantly, the settlement required comprehensive reforms, mandatory body camera usage with severe penalties for turning them off, independent oversight of animal control interactions, regular audits of officer finances, and enhanced training on civil rights and the treatment of disabled citizens. The case became a landmark in police accountability. Law schools studied it. Civil rights organizations cited it. And Marcus Thompson, a blind veteran from San Diego, became an unlikely symbol of courage and perseverance. But for Marcus, sitting in his apartment one evening with Apollo's head in his lap, and Jake visiting with Rex, the victory was simpler and more personal. I almost gave up, you know, he told Jake. After I lost my sight, I almost gave up on everything. Then Apollo came into my life and gave me a reason to keep going. And then you showed up in that parking lot. 2 moments of grace in a life that felt cursed. Jake scratched Rex behind the ears. Maybe that's what life is. A series of moments. Most of them ordinary. But every now and then, one that changes everything. You changed everything for me, Marcus said simply. You changed things for yourself, Jake corrected. You had the courage to fight back. I just happened to have a camera phone. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. 2 warriors who'd found peace not in the absence of battle, but in standing up when it mattered most. 2 years after the trial, San Diego had changed in small but significant ways. The reforms mandated by the settlement had been implemented. Body cameras were mandatory and monitored. The police department had established an Office of Community Oversight. Training programs emphasized de-escalation and the rights of disabled citizens. But the most lasting change was in policy. It was in the friendship between 2 veterans and the organization they built together. The Marcus Thompson Foundation for Veterans with Service Animals was born from a conversation on Marcus's balcony 6 months after the trial. There are thousands of disabled veterans like me, Marcus had said, struggling to get service dogs. The wait lists are years long. The costs are prohibitive. The training is intense. And even when they finally get their dogs, they don't always know their rights. They don't know how to advocate for themselves. Jake had been thinking along the same lines. What if we change that? What if we use the media attention we got, the settlement money, the connections we've made? What if we built something that actually helped people? The foundation started small. They rented a modest office in North Park, hired a part-time administrator, and began reaching out to veterans organizations. The mission was threefold: provide funding assistance for veterans seeking service dogs, offer legal education about rights and protections, and train service dogs themselves. The training program was Jake's brainchild. Using contacts from his military days, he recruited former military working dog handlers. They established partnerships with animal shelters to identify dogs with the right temperament. Dogs that might otherwise be euthanized were given a second chance as service animals. Rex became the program's first official trainer. Despite being retired, he proved invaluable in socializing younger dogs, teaching the calm demeanor required for service work. Apollo, too, took on a mentoring role, particularly with dogs being trained as guides to the visually impaired. The Foundation's first graduate was a German shepherd named Liberty, paired with Army veteran Sarah Chun, who'd lost both legs in a roadside bombing in Iraq. At the graduation ceremony, held at Balboa Park with over 100 supporters in attendance, Sarah stood with her new service dog and spoke about hope. "I thought my life was over when I lost my legs," she said. "I thought I'd never be independent again. But Liberty is giving me back my freedom. And Marcus and Jake are showing all of us that our struggles matter, that our service still means something, and that we don't have to fight alone anymore." The foundation grew quickly. Corporate sponsors came forward. Individual donors contributed. A wealthy San Diego philanthropist, moved by Marcus's story, donated a property in Santee where they could establish a full training facility. Within 18 months, the foundation had paired 23 service dogs with disabled veterans. The wait list was long, but they were making a dent. More importantly, they were building a community. Monthly meetups at Balboa Park became gatherings of veterans and their service dogs, a support network where people who understood what it meant to serve, to sacrifice, and to struggle with invisible wounds could connect. Marcus became an unexpected public speaker. Initially terrified of addressing crowds, he found his voice when talking about service dogs and veterans' rights. He spoke at VA hospitals, veteran service organizations, even testified before the California State Senate about improving service dog access. "I never want to be in the public eye," he admitted during one speech. "But if sharing my story helps one veteran get the support they need, if it prevents one person from being victimized the way I was, then it's worth it." Jake, meanwhile, found purpose he hadn't felt since leaving the Navy. The foundation gave structure to his days, meaning to his struggle with PTSD. Training dogs, mentoring younger veterans, building something positive. It was healing work. "For years after I left the service, I felt adrift," he told a journalist doing a follow-up story. "Like my best days were behind me. But this, helping veterans who are struggling, training these incredible animals, this is mission work. This is what I'm supposed to be doing." Rebecca Chen's original article won her the Pulitzer Prize for local reporting. She used her platform to continue covering veteran issues and police reform. She stayed in touch with Marcus and Jake, documenting the foundation's growth and the lives it changed. One of her follow-up articles focused on the ripple effects of the case. Other cities had launched similar investigations into police misconduct involving vulnerable populations. 3 other extortion rings were uncovered in California alone. National legislation was introduced to strengthen protections for service animal handlers. The legal precedents set by the case were being cited in courts across the country. Patricia Hayes, who'd represented Marcus pro bono, became a leading expert on disability rights law. She taught courses at the University of San Diego School of Law, using Marcus's case as a primary example of how one person's courage could create systemic change. But the most profound changes were personal. Marcus reconnected with his daughter, Emily. The publicity around the trial brought them back into contact, and slowly, tentatively, they rebuilt their relationship. She visited San Diego, met Apollo, and was amazed by her father's transformation. I remember him after he came back from Afghanistan. Emily told Jake during one visit. He was broken, lost. I was a teenager and didn't know how to help him. I watched him sink into depression and felt helpless. Seeing him now, running this foundation, helping others, speaking in public, he's become someone I'm incredibly proud of. Marcus and Emily now video called weekly. She'd even moved to San Diego from Arizona, taking a job at a biotech company, partly to be closer to her father. Watching Marcus teach her how Apollo worked, seeing the bond between them, healed something in both of them. Jake's journey was different, but equally transformative. The foundation work helped with his PTSD, but he still had dark days. Rex was always there, sensing when Jake needed grounding, providing the steady presence that medical treatment alone couldn't offer. He started dating someone he met through the foundation, a former Army nurse named Lisa, who volunteered at their events. She understood military culture, understood trauma, didn't flinch when Jake had nightmares or needed to leave a crowded restaurant because his anxiety spiked. For the first time since leaving the service, Jake confided to Marcus, I feel like I'm building something instead of just surviving. Apollo and Rex became minor celebrities in San Diego. They were featured in a documentary about service dogs. Their images were used in awareness campaigns. Children at local schools learned about service dogs through presentations featuring the two four-legged heroes. Apollo, now 7 years old, was still in excellent health and working condition. He guided Marcus everywhere, to foundation events, to speaking engagements, through the routines of daily life. The bond between them had only deepened over time. Rex, at 8, was semi-retired from training duties, but still came to the foundation facility daily. Younger dogs looked up to him, literally and figuratively. His calm presence set the standard for what a service dog should be. On the 3rd anniversary of the parking lot incident, the foundation held a celebration at Balboa Park. Over 300 people attended, veterans, service dogs, donors, supporters, and journalists. The mayor of San Diego gave a speech. So did the new police chief, who acknowledged the department's failures and praised the reforms that have been implemented. But the most moving moment came when Marcus and Jake stood together at the podium, Apollo and Rex by their sides, and reflected on what the past 3 years had meant. 3 years ago, I was a blind veteran struggling to survive. Marcus said, I had one friend, Apollo, and very little hope. Then something terrible almost happened. 2 corrupt police officers tried to take away the one thing that gave my life meaning. But something else happened too. A stranger stepped forward. He didn't have to. He could have walked away. But he didn't. And that single act of courage changed everything. Jake spoke next. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that day. About why I stopped. About what made me pull out my phone and start recording. I think it's because when you've served, when you've seen the worst of what humans can do, you develop a sense of responsibility. You can't unsee injustice. You can't ignore someone in need. Marcus likes to say I saved him, but the truth is, he saved me too. This foundation, this work we do, it gives meaning to everything we've been through. They introduced the foundation's 50th service dog graduate, a golden retriever named Hope paired with a Marine Corps veteran who'd lost an arm and suffered traumatic brain injury in Fallujah. As Hope and her new partner walked across the stage, the crowd rose in standing ovation. That evening, after the celebration wound down, Marcus and Jake sat on a bench in Balboa Park. It was the same bench where Marcus used to come before meeting Jake, back when he felt most alone. Now it felt like a memorial to how far they'd come. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been in that parking lot? Marcus asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. Sometimes. You probably would have lost Apollo, at least temporarily. You would have paid whatever they demanded. Maybe you would have gotten him back. Maybe not. The extortion would have continued. More victims. More pain. One moment, Marcus said, one person making one choice. It changed so many lives. That's the thing about courage. Jake said. "You never know how far the ripples will spread. You just have to choose to do the right thing and trust that it matters." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fountain, feeling the evening breeze, Apollo and Rex lying peacefully at their feet. The sun was setting over San Diego, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that Marcus couldn't see but could feel in the warmth on his face. 2 veterans, 2 service dogs, 1 moment of courage, and a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. The Marcus Thompson Foundation for Veterans with Service Animals continues to operate today, having paired over 200 service dogs with disabled veterans. The training facility in Santee has expanded to include a full veterinary clinic and rehabilitation center. The annual waiting list includes veterans from all 50 states. David Reeves and Tom Hartley remain in federal prison. Both men have been denied early parole. The other officers involved in the scheme have served their time and been released, but all are permanently barred from law enforcement. The San Diego Police Department's reforms have become a model for other cities. Body camera compliance is over 98%. Complaints about officer misconduct have dropped by 40%. The Office of Community Oversight has investigated over 100 cases, resulting in genuine accountability. But perhaps the most important legacy is the simplest one. Marcus Thompson still walks to his coffee shop every morning with Apollo by his side. The baristas still know his order. The path is familiar. The routine is comfortable. And he knows that if he ever needs help, if injustice ever threatens him again, there's a community ready to stand with him. A friend with a phone who knows how to record video. A system that, while imperfect, can still deliver justice when good people refuse to stay silent. In a world that often feels dark and broken, that's not a small thing. That's everything. The courage of Jake Mitchell and the resilience of Marcus Thompson remind us that we must never remain silent in the face of injustice. What would you have done if you were in Jake's position? Would you have had the courage to intervene? Leave your opinion in the comments below. We want to know what you think about this incredible story. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more inspiring and true stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any content. And there's more. Click on the next video that will appear on your screen because we have another surprising story waiting for you. Until next time,